We are good.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you're all staying well and healthy through COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're going through. We have Janel from Grand Living at Bridgewater with us here today, and she's going to present on effective communication strategies. If you have any questions, I will jump in again at the end and give you my contact information so that you can reach out individually. Again, thanks for joining us today, and I will go ahead and hand it over to Janelle.
Thank you, Kara. All right, so today we're going to be talking about effective communication strategies. And I just wanted to thank Kara for putting this all virtually for everyone to receive at their homes safely. But effective communication strategies is something that a lot of people are dealing with now that they are really confined to their homes. So if you do have any questions, please, you can write them in the comments, and Kara can help answer those questions as well. But again, my name is Janel Meints. I have been working in this field for around 10 years, specifically with those living with dementia. And I will kind of relate some of my life experiences with my uncle who has been diagnosed with vascular dementia. So I'm kind of getting it from both sides there. But today we will be talking about how communication takes place when someone has Alzheimer's disease. And by the end of the program, you'll be able to explain the communication changes that take place throughout the course of the disease, decode some of the verbal and behavioral messages that are delivered by someone with dementia, and then how a person, you then as a caregiver can respond that are helpful to your loved one, and then identifying strategies that help you connect and communicate at the end, or I'm sorry, at each stage of the disease. So with communication, communication is more than just talking and listening. It's also about sending and receiving messages. So I'll kind of bring up the way that I have kind of talked to my family about it also is like two people playing catch. So both people have the gloves, and I call those the synapses, and then the neuron. Also, the messages is like the ball going back and forth. So with that, there's lots of different messages. Just picture that baseball going from glove to glove, glove to glove, constantly. Every single thing that you are doing, from blinking to breathing to speaking to finding the correct words, that's all different sending and receiving messages. We send and receive messages through our attitude, our tone of voice, our facial expressions, and our body language. Communication is a way to express who we are and how we relate to one another. So as the brain changes with Alzheimer's disease and its progression, people do lose the ability to speak and decode the language. So it's better, the better we understand these changes, the better that we can connect with our loved ones and others with Alzheimer's throughout the course of the entire disease. So as Alzheimer's disease and other dementias progress, people do lose their ability to communicate their thoughts and feelings through their words. They may also lose the ability to understand the words that others are saying to them. But they do maintain a sense of self through all of the stages of the disease. So this means that the elements that make up a person's characteristics and their personality that makes a person unique, that will remain a part of who that person is throughout the entire disease. So connecting with that person's self is a key effective communication to stay connected with them throughout the entire course of the disease. Also, language, the abilities diminish as the disease progresses. So as communication moves from easy conversation to relying on emotions and all of those five senses that we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, to be able to connect and be able to communicate every different need. And as care partners and caregivers, you are the ones that are going to have to adjust to the ways of how your loved one is able to communicate. And it's really up to you to meet that person where they're at to maintain the connection with them throughout the disease. So I really want to hit this home where we're taught, as healthcare professionals, and in my family as well, that we're respecting the person as the adult he or she is, and adjusting our communication based on what is meaningful to that person today. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we're going to start with talking about early stage. Some call this the mild stage. And in this stage, you may or may not see changes in the way that someone communicates. So for some people, there may be some shifts with how they are able to find the right word and how they're able to conversate. And some of the most common changes that you'll be noticing in that very early stage is, difficulty finding the right words. Saying we use the phrase word salad, and it's basically when you're mixing up a salad and there's lots of different things going on, trying to pick out that right word. Sometimes it comes out as something that the person is not to state. So for example, if I wanted to say, I need to go to the bathroom, but I couldn't find that word bathroom, instead I'm going to replace it with something that doesn't make sense. So I need to go to the slipper, and then the slipper, and not being able to find that word bathroom. Taking longer to speak or respond. So again, that message needs to travel all the way back and forth to be able to respond. Think of those baseball mitts again with that baseball. It has to make its way, from one mitt to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the brain to tell it what to do, and then all the way back. So it takes a much longer time. Withdrawing from conversations. Again, this is kind of where we realized with my uncle that something was changing. He was usually, the one that was always starting the conversations at the dinner table and keeping things flowing. And now that he's withdrawing from conversations, he couldn't find those words quickly or correctly, and he couldn't even follow that conversation to see where he could input. Sometimes it's easier then for a person to just withdraw. Struggling to make decision-making or problem-solving. So to think about, if I know that I need to go get dressed, I know the steps that I need to take in order to make that happen. Someone in that early stage, they don't have those steps. They don't even know where to begin. So a lot of the times with decision-making or problem-solving, it just is kind of a wash. There's nothing on the docket of different steps to follow. And then reacting more emotionally than in the past, or avoiding that discussion of the disease and its impact. The emotions are severely inhibited during the disease, and regulation is basically gone of those emotions. You can go from happy to sad to upset in a very short amount of time. So whether you are noticing the changes in that person, the way that person speaks or not, communication in the early stage is crucial. This is the time that everyone is involved in adjusting to the diagnosis and having thoughts and feelings and, apprehensions and anxieties about the changes that are coming about. And also remember that denial is a part of this disease for some people. Other people can also feel extremely overwhelmed. So I know for my uncle, the denial part was the big part, and it was denial paired with paranoia. This isn't, no, that's not what the doctor said, and you're making things up, and it escalates from there. So coming to terms with the diagnosis and the emotions that you are all feeling by talking together and expressing your connection. And then communicating throughout this process can also bring closeness that will help everybody adjust more easily as the disease progresses. Positive communication is key. All I can really say to that beginning communication with the early stages, one of the basic things that I've told my family as well is that you don't need to be correcting constantly. If a loved one said maybe that they got their hair cut 2 weeks ago, but it was really 1 week ago, does it really matter to correct them each and every time? So while you look at the changes that you may notice on the slide, they're going through a lot of different changes in their brains, and correcting them each and every time may not be the most positive way of communicating. So the next video we are unable to play, but basically within that video, Martha, who's the Associate Director of the Volunteer Research Programs for the Alzheimer's Association, their national office, mentions that caregivers may struggle to know how to help the person with communication in that early stage, but you can ask the person directly how to help them. You can ask the person for his or her preferences on what you want to help with while being respectful of that person's feelings. So on the next slide, we'll go through, that communication with the early stage. One of the best ways to ensure that you're offering the help with the best communication for that specific person is to ask directly. Do you want me to wait to fill in a missing word if you can't find it? It's really a preferential thing for your loved one. Are they going to get agitated if you're filling in their words before they can find it? Is it time for your family to practice patience and just waiting to see if their brain does find that word, or waiting that little extra bit? Also, keeping your sentences direct and straightforward. This can help the person avoid feeling lost in a conversation. So here we want to make sure that we're asking families and caregivers to keep communication short, sweet, and simple. So an example of a short sentence would not be, do you need to eat some dinner an hour later? What would you like? And just kind of going on and on. Instead, you can say a very short sentence, are you hungry? And then saying, something sweet. You're not going to say, go sit down for dinner. Instead, you could kind of flip it in a different way, and you've done a lot for me, take a load off, trying to be a little bit sweeter in your approach. And then the last one is simple. Instead of saying something like, would you like chicken, potatoes, broccoli, carrots, cranberries, salad, or bread? You can say, would you like chicken or steak? Just giving them a yes or no type of question. And it may take the person longer to find the words or put them together to be able to express them. So allowing extra time for conversations. The person doesn't want to feel pressured or rushed. And also, just as a side note, just making sure that your facial expressions and body gestures are kind during this time. Not that you are agitated that they're taking a long time, or your arms aren't folded in front of you, making them feel, pressured or rushed. So in the very beginning stages, the person with dementia does need to have his or her voice heard. You can help facilitate this when you meet the person right where they are at that very time, not what they were able to do the day before or the year before or 5 years before, but meeting that person where they are right now. And then be sure to include the person in any conversation he or she wishes, especially if those have, an impact on the future and what, they may want in the future. So we'll go to the next slide, and it is communication in the early stage and what to keep in mind. So not making assumptions about the person's ability to communicate. So again, this dementia is like a fingerprint. So every single person's is going to be different. Doesn't matter if they have the same age, the same diagnosis, the same educational background, the same environment that they were raised in. Every single person's is going to be different. So, communicating with that specific person will be different from communicating with another. Speaking directly to the person, this is one of my biggest pet peeves when someone is talking about someone with dementia, like they aren't sitting right next to them. I actually had a previous resident. I was hearing a concern from a daughter, and she was talking about her mom while her mom was sitting there, and her mom chimed in and said, the statement, "I'm not deaf or dead. I can hear you talking about me." And it just kind of was an awakening. Get them involved in the conversation and speak directly to that person. Don't box them out. They can hear you, and it's just, the positive communication is what we want. Exploring which method of communication is most comfortable for that person. This can include letters, emails, phone calls, or in-person conversations, and then kind of what people prefer. So I worked with a woman that had dementia with Parkinson's disease. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and a year later, she started developing symptoms of dementia. And she was nearing the end stage, but throughout her entire disease progression, as her verbal abilities started to decline, she was able to still communicate effectively by using a pen and paper. And that was really important to the family, to the caregivers, just to know that piece, that she was able to do those things. And if she had an issue, that a pen and paper would be our first means of communicating. And it's okay to laugh. Sometimes humor lightens the mood and makes the communication a little bit easier. And to be honest and frank about your feelings. So don't pull away. It's very difficult to preach this, but don't pull away your friendship and support, because they're important to that person with dementia. But I know the Alzheimer's Association does have support groups for family and friends, because it is an extremely difficult time to have a loved one that has that disease, has dementia, and you feel as if you are not as in tune with your friend or your loved one as you always have been. So the next one is going to be the middle stage or the moderate stage, and many changes in this stage affect communication directly. So if you
Janelle, you've cut out. Are you there? Janelle, I'm guessing that maybe your computer froze. Janelle, if you can hear me, can you type in the chat for me?
Kara, can you hear me?
Yep, now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what
That's
happened.
okay. No worries. We've had
Okay.
this issue a couple times. I think you probably just froze. So,
Okay, perfect. All right. So, now we are, thank you. Now we're going to be talking about the middle stage or the moderate stage of dementia. And in this stage, um, there's many changes that affect communication. So if you noticed some of the changes in the early stage, they're most likely going to be more pronounced in this middle stage. So some of the changes that you may notice are listed on this slide. So it's increased difficulty in finding the right words, using familiar words repeatedly, inventing new words to describe familiar things. So for example, one of the residents will say, I would like some white coffee. And, we quickly found out that he was talking about milk. He would like some milk. So it's just inventing those new words to explain the same typical things. Easily losing your train of thought and then getting frustrated. So I do the same thing. If I can't think of a word, if I can't think of where my sentence was going to be eventually going, it's extremely frustrating. Imagine that happening, constantly every single statement that you're saying throughout your day. Sometimes people will just, speak less frequently. They'll start, choosing not to communicate. It's easier that way. Communicating through behavior rather than words is definitely something that happens much more often. So I do want to put in a little side note, when people do talk about, quote unquote behaviors in dementia, it really is a collection of communication tactics that are expressing some type of unmet physical or emotional need. There's a reason behind that. It's a form of communication. I think that's really important to know. But you're always going to be consulting your doctor when you notice a major change or sudden changes in yourself or a loved one. So some of the other issues that people may see, difficulty organizing those words logically, reverting to speaking in a native language. This is my uncle in a nutshell, going back to his native language of Italian. You know, using curse words. So there's a part of the brain that forbidden words are stored in. The first time that your mom tells you, like, you're not allowed to say that word, your brain automatically stores it in this little lockbox. And some of those words and phrases and statements are, opened up then with dementia. So it's not that a resident would or a person living with dementia would like to be saying those words aloud. It's just, that piece of communication that is still left. Relying on gestures instead of speaking, a lot of hand gestures, facial expressions. Sometimes those things are more easily controlled than trying to go through all of the mess of trying to get those words, finding those words in their brain and then formatting them into a sentence and then carrying that out. Difficulty following a conversation or a TV program. I had a wife say that, her husband would just watch the blank screen of the television. So he started with watching TV every day, and then he started muting it. And then eventually he just would turn it off. And then he would just stare at the black screen, because it was just not something that he could follow any longer. And then also difficulty decoding what other people say. So it's research has shown that every fourth word that we are speaking to someone living with dementia is omitted. So a sentence that would be something like, I have to go to the bathroom, it would say something like, I have to go to, it would just be a huge mess, and I didn't write that down, so I apologize. But changes in the brain make tracking and decoding words more difficult. So for that reason, people begin to use behaviors to communicate more often. So next we'll discuss the adjustments that you can make to continue to connect with that person living with Alzheimer's disease. And please note that on this next slide, we don't have that video, but some physical conditions and medications can affect a person's ability to communicate. If changes do occur suddenly and dramatically, you do need to consult your doctor. There may be a medical issue that needs to be addressed right away, such as maybe a urinary tract infection or some type of side effect of a medication. So in this, the next video, she was talking about, as a caregiver, how she gives advice to other caregivers. So, she was mentioning, like, take your time when you're responding with someone with dementia. You can't expect the person with dementia to behave as he or she might have in the past, with a reasonable response. And if a communication of yours isn't getting the desired response, focus on what you can change and what you are doing to alter that situation. You are of sound mind, so you can be changing a lot of things instead of expecting the person living with dementia to do that. So when communicating with a person in the middle stages, we're typically wanting to approach the person in a very generic way, which is gentle, approaching from the front, saying who you are and calling that person by their name, such as, hi, Dad, it's your daughter, Sue. And this will help orient that person or get his or her attention. Sometimes using touch to show that you care, but making sure that the person can see that touch coming so that they don't get startled. And this is a huge one. Don't criticize or correct or put your perspective on it and argue different things with someone that has dementia, because it will backfire almost 100% of the time. So again, you're paying attention to your facial expressions and the tone of your voice. And you're also being calm and patient with that person. Someone with dementia can really feel that tension, if that's something that you are carrying in your tone, in your facial expressions, or in your body gestures. And finally, remember to take some time to communicate. Give yourself and the person that you're talking to enough time to respond, interact, and connect. Don't make it such a rushed point. In every different type of dementia training that I've had, we're taught to join into their world. As long as that person with dementia is safe, you can agree with their statements. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in this next video, Rebecca, she talks about how it can be, when her mother repeats herself often. So Rebecca talks about how it can be frustrating for everyone when someone with dementia repeats questions and statements and behaviors. And rather than trying to convince that person of what you remember happening, it helps to accept that the person does not remember it as you do. And we are to accept that person's perspective and respond that way. It won't make too much of a difference if you know that you're right and you've really hit that point home, to the point that your loved one or that person with dementia is upset and now the entire day is ruined. You making your point really won't be as sweet. On the next slide, we talk about when you join the person's reality, you take a little time to see the world as he or she may be seeing it right then at that moment. So when seen from his or her perspective, that person's behavior can be more easily understood by you. And due to the changes that the brain has due to the disease, the person will not be able to see your perspective. So you will need to be the one to use respect and empathy to see the world through their eyes. So the first thing is to really listen to figure out what the person wants or needs. And this means, paying attention to the words and the behavior of the person. sometimes they're completely different. The words are different than the behavior. So kind of be a detective and figure out kind of where to go from that point, and how to resolve that. Also keep in mind that the person may be saying something about their feelings, but maybe feeling something else. So for example, if a loved one said, "I can still drive just fine," it may also contain the feeling of, as if the person said, "I don't want to give up my independence, so don't take that from me." Or the words, "Stop taking over my life, I hate it." They may actually reflect the meaning, "I hate this disease and I don't understand why I can do what I always could." And let the person know that you understand what he or she may be feeling and why, whether they are expressed through words or behavior. Be their confidant. You're their person. They aren't alone. Remind them, "You are not alone. I'm here. I'm here with you. I'm not going anywhere." Just give them that sense of relief and safety. And answer any question or address any issue that he or she may be bringing up. So be brief and to the point. So this is kind of a more severe one, but if someone said, "Someone stole all of my jewelry," instead of saying, "I can't believe that," or kind of going on a rant of, you will want to say, like, "No, they didn't, you put it in here," but instead, you can just say a very brief and to the point statement that kind of joins their world that says, "Oh no, I'm going to call the police," and then kind of go through that to validate their feelings as well. But we're responding to the emotions behind the behavior or concern first and foremost. So if that person with dementia is communicating with words, you may want to say, "You seem sad. Do you feel sad?" And then wait for a response. If the person says yes, you may want to guess the cause, as in, "Do you miss the way things used to be?" If the person says yes, you can add, "Well, I do too," and, connect that way. Also, when the person is communicating with behavior, we can see if we can identify, the emotion behind that behavior. So if a person's rummaging through possessions, it may be a way of communicating, are they bored? Do they need something? Hitting during bathing can also be a way that the person says that they are, the temperature is too hot or too cold. They're uncomfortable with being exposed in front of you, or they feel like they're out of control. And finally, only after that you've responded to those emotions, you'll reassure and redirect that person. So you'll encourage them to do something that may shift that person's thinking and behavior. So to continue with the example, you could say, "I'm glad to be with you here today. Let's go for a walk outside. I would like to be with you." So you're moving the person from, the issue that they are going through right now and the emotion, and, gradually moving it to something that's active, that can lift their spirits. And your loved one best, so what makes them smile. And if you try one thing, it's not always going to work. But the only plus of this disease is that you do have other chances to figure out exactly what that is without a detrimental, traumatic experience each and every time. You'll consistently be working toward, to figure out what that main piece of how you can get someone to, I'm even losing my track of words, but if something doesn't work, then you're going to, move on to the next and move on to the next until you find that safety within that person. Okay. So the next slide, keeping it slow and basic. So taking your time and being patient when you communicate. The more you slow down, the less resistance that you will have to encounter, because the person won't feel rushed, and they'll be able to really understand. So I would never speak with someone that has dementia as quickly as I'm talking through this presentation. I would slow it down and I would lower my tone and match their level of their energy level as well. And, you'll base it off of, again, each and every person is different. So rushing, even if you're rushed, think about the last time that someone was rushing you. It just leaves you feeling frustrated and upset with not only yourself, but then that person as well. But if you're taking your time with your loved one, you'll avoid frustration for just about everyone. Again, using those short sentences, so using basic words, speaking clearly, and being specific. So, what would you like for breakfast? That may be just a loaded question. There's so many different foods that a brain can, formulate. And so instead, you can say it's breakfast time. Would you like eggs or oatmeal? Give them one or the other. And then on the next slide, we'll talk about giving multiple cues. So it's helpful to give the person as many cues as you can to be able to communicate with them. This reinforces your words and clarifies that message that you're trying to give to them. So providing those visual cues and gestures, avoiding those sudden movements, and just using gentle gestures, something that's not going to startle the person. Writing everything down. So reminder notes, calendars, labels, lists. The big thing is labeled photos. I can't even begin to say the difference that labeled photos make for someone living with dementia. Keeping track of a person's name and relationships. This is extremely difficult in the middle stage. And I always think of like, how is this relatable in my own personal life? And I think about all the times that I've seen someone that I should recognize, I should know their name, but I can't find it. And it's so incredibly agitating. And I'm racking my brain, and really my brain's working overtime to try and find that one person's name. So imagine feeling that every single time that you see another person. This is what someone with dementia is going through. So, if you are providing them photos, even something along the lines of, the person's name, the year, the occasion of the event in whatever photo it is, and then kind of, if you wanted to go an extra little bit also, just like a little summary of that day. It's just something that will, really key in and spark some memories for your loved one. So also offering answers in your questions. So it's much easier for someone in the middle stage to choose what they want for lunch if the question isn't open-ended, like we just discussed, because it is a loaded question. So instead, you would say something like, I'm making sandwiches for lunch. Would you like ham or turkey? And if that person seems, stuck, then you can suggest an answer. How about ham? And then you can kind of see what that person is going to decide. If they seem a little wary, then you can change it. How about turkey? And then try and, figure out what that person's preference would be. Repeating information or questions. Although you may have, reminders in place, you will need to plan on repeating information to that person. So repetition is, needed from your part as well as with theirs. And then turning those negatives into positives. So instead of, saying it's time for your shower, you haven't showered in days, that could trigger any type of resistance. But instead, you can say, let's go get cleaned up. We have church in the morning. So you'll be ready, or, let's get cleaned up. You'll be ready for Cindy's visit this afternoon. Turning that into a positive situation. And avoid quizzing that person. So when you quiz a person, it could be something as, much as saying something like, remember when, or like, Dad, who am I? Or don't you know who I am? Those are types of different quizzes that doesn't really need to be put into their thought processes. So it just, it's much more respectful and helpful to give that person the information that they need to kind of complete that task or that situation, along with the reminders that are needed. So you'll want to respond and be empathetic and reassuring to that person. Let them know that you're there, that you're listening. The facts are far less important than the person's feelings. And these feelings and perspectives are really extremely real to that person. And even though they may not match your reality, you're responding to those feelings first and can help avoid that resistance. So again, providing that reassurance that you are together and safe and that you're there to help. Saying something like, I hear you, I am here for you, I am listening. And again, as long as there's not a safety issue, agreeing and going with the flow, finding the common ground whenever possible. Making any adjustments to the situation that are necessary, and then redirecting that person to a different activity if needed. So the last stage that we'll talk about is the late stage or the severe stage. And in this stage, a person may only use a few words, or sounds. They may only say a few familiar phrases or words again. But you may, as a caregiver and a loved one, you may feel a strong urge to do something at all times. And it's really your presence and your connection with them that is much more important than actually physically doing something for that person. Remember that throughout all of these stages, this person is an adult. They've had a full life. They have a sense of self. They've had careers. This is something that this disease is unfortunately demeaning. It loses all of your functioning of your bowels. It really, changes a person and their abilities to care for themselves, which they have been doing since they were, little. And it kind of then brings, when people say it's full circle, when, someone has that mentality of a 2-year-old in the late stages of the disease. I don't like that, how people will kind of refer to that, because that person is not a 2-year-old. That person is an 82-year-old, and they deserve the respect that they have earned throughout their entire life. So, making sure that you as a caregiver are not, that person is still that strong individual that you have always, known throughout your entire life, and communicating that way. Modifying and adapting different ways in order to communicate with that loved one, but not breaking it down so that you are kind of losing that person's sense of self. So you can connect with those aspects of that person's sense of self by remembering their personal history, respecting their preferences. The goal is to help the person feel content and happy whenever possible. Just having good moments instead of just good days. So moment to moment, we're just attempting to have a good one. And then keep talking, keep using familiar words, names and phrases, poems, passages, songs with a person in this late stage. Whether you get a direct response from the person or not, the sound of your voice actually helps maintain the connection between you. There's lots of different therapies, sensory stimulation, pet therapy, art therapy, light therapy, music therapy, all different ways of communication in this late stage. So using the 5 senses is a great way to connect with the person with dementia. This can be done through touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. So on this next video Sandra does talk about connecting with her mother in the late stage of the disease. She mentions that it can help to try and understand the person's feelings in the late stage. Connecting through those 5 senses can be a way to connect that makes that person feel comfortable, seen, heard, and valued. And then on the next slide, we'll kind of talk about how to connect using those different 5 senses. So the first one is touch. Feeling different fabrics, raised fabrics, silks, cotton. The nerve endings and their fingertips are extremely sensitive. And that's something that you'll kind of see people living with dementia kind of tap their fingertips to their other fingers, or they'll kind of drag their fingers along different textures and different things. So, making sure that people are getting that need of touching something and touching different types of textures and fabrics is very essential. So maybe identifying shapes by touch. This could be something as easy as, going on, I don't know, Amazon or something and getting colorful buttons that are in different shapes and putting them in, a bin, and having your loved one kind of pick up a different button and not be able to look at the shape and try and figure out, what shape is that one in. Putting lotion and giving light hand massages. A lot of people are dealing with arthritis, and especially with dementia, it's extremely difficult to relax muscles. Their brain just does not send that message. So your hands can be extremely, extremely uncomfortable. So, giving hand massages throughout the day can be a really big point of relief. Visiting with animals, identifying everyday items in a bag to touch, molding non-toxic clay or dough, or even just holding the person's hand or stroking their back or their arm. And this may be the most powerful way to connect with someone non-verbally. The next sense is the sense of sight. And so some of the things that you can do is maybe laminate brightly colored pictures to look at together, watch videos of animals and nature and travel, look through photo albums together, and again, making sure that those have people's names and that we're not sitting there quizzing someone, but instead just enjoying the pictures themselves. Viewing photos of famous paintings and favorite different settings or prominent people from the past. Watching birds or looking at aquariums, painting with different watercolors or just colors in general, and going outdoors and sitting by an open window or going for a drive, out and about if you feel comfortable in doing that. All of those senses, feeling the sunshine, seeing the people, and, seeing the pets walking by, hearing the nature sounds and feeling the breeze. Those are a great way to get all of the senses all together. Using sounds and music are some of the most powerful ways to connect in the late stage. So sounds and music, some things that you can do is listen to familiar music, which includes favorite music styles that may stir happy memories, such as jazz, big band, dance music, hymns, and classical pieces. And then listening to recordings of the sounds of nature, farms, cities, animals, or babies. So identify the musical instruments or animals by their sounds. Listening to songs or speech in the person's native language. Reading books and poetry, scripture, or newspaper articles, and then, maybe just having the gentle tone of your voice be something that the person is just hearing, maybe just humming together. The next sense is smell, and it's one of our most basic senses. And although this sense may diminish with age and disease progression, we'll consider using some of the ideas on this slide to connect with, to connect with your loved one. So connecting with through smell, making small plastic bags containing items for the person to smell, such as, fresh herbs and spices, cotton balls dipped in essential oils, grass clippings, or fragrant flowers, teas and coffee beans, using lotions for hand massages that have fragrant smells to those, and then cooking or feeding the person foods that smell good, such as, apple pie or chicken noodle soup. It is very important to, keep in mind that if allergies, any allergies that the person may have, and avoid any sense that may aggravate them, especially if you're going to be putting any type of essential oil on any part of the body, any, part of the skin. It's really important to kind of figure out if they have any allergies to those. The next sense is taste. And well into the late stage, people with dementia enjoy tasting different foods and flavors. And be sure, though, that you're only asking that person, or I'm sorry, not asking, but placing a food in front of someone that a person can swallow safely. So as the ability of to swallow diminishes, choking becomes a hazard. So favorite foods, home-baked goodies, popsicles, flavored drinks, ice creams, and puddings. As you can tell, a lot of these are really sweet. That is something, that people can still be tasting, and a lot of the times at the late stage of the disease, we're just needing to input calories into diets. So, putting in a lot of more of those baked goods and those sweets are okay. Again, you will have to consult your doctor about different foods and things like that you or your loved one will be consuming. Finger foods are also great. They're easy to manipulate independently, so that you can give them that little bit of independence back. Colorful foods as well. It's just something that will gain their attention. Not anything too wild, so don't dye, everything green. They may not eat that then. The next slide is just to summarize, and we're maximizing our communication or connectedness with a person with dementia, and that involves a few different points, and those are to understand what is and what isn't possible to change by understanding all that you possibly can about the disease. Staying up to date with the latest information and scientific breakthroughs on the Alzheimer's Association website, and by attending workshops and conferences. And then knowing and accepting the cognitive and functional limitations that a person will have throughout this progression of the disease. You will need to set realistic expectations of that person. Remember that the person is an adult with a sense of self, and that should always be respected. Remember to use feelings to connect. You convey your mood through your actions and your tone of voice, so the person will pick up on that and reflect those feelings. And then you're staying focused on your positive feelings for the person, increasing your understanding of their reality. You're demonstrating your caring to the person to help you connect, and you're listening, observing, and trying to decode what the person is communicating about his or her needs and wants. By joining the person's reality, you can really become better and understand what is needed and how to intervene. So communication evolves throughout the entire progression and the stages of Alzheimer's, and adapting to those do require commitment and patience. And adjusting those communication and disease progressions, you can learn to connect deeply and meaningful with your loved one. So I think the next video is by Dr. Sam Fazio, and he is the Director of Special Projects for the Alzheimer's Association at the National Office. And he mentions that, to care for yourself while you're caring for someone else can have an effect on both you and that person that you are trying to care for with the disease. and you can provide a better care for the person with dementia if you are well rested and taking care of your physical and emotional needs. So Kara, I don't know if you want to take from here.
Yep, I will jump in. So thank you, Janelle, for that. That was awesome. It was a really good overview of communication. Really appreciate you jumping in and presenting today. And just wanted to follow up with some of you with the different ways the Alzheimer's Association can help. So not only do we deliver programs like this, but there are many other ways that we help families and people that are living with dementia. First of all, our website, alz.org, has many different resources, a lot of reading material on there. So I would definitely encourage logging on to alz.org. We even have some stuff that's specifically geared toward COVID-19 and how some tips and pointers on how to deal with that and some of the current situations that we're in. We also have a 24/7 helpline, and that's listed here on this slide. The 24/7 helpline, is obviously available all day long, every single day. It is staffed by counselors and social workers, and they are literally there waiting to pick up your call. Should you have any questions, run into any issues with behaviors, doesn't matter what time of day it is, they are masters in social work and counselors that are, like I said, waiting to pick up your call and help. And they are Alzheimer's Association employees. So they've all been trained by the association and have over 100 hours of training before they're even allowed to pick up a phone call from a constituent. And there are all kinds of success stories out there, so please don't hesitate to ever give them a call. We are also available from the local level as well. And what I will do is here before we're done is I will change my screen and put up my contact information for you so that you can reach out to me locally because I'm more than happy to help as well. There's also free online education available at training.alz.org. That's somewhat similar to the program that you listened to here today. So I would check that out as well. A few different ways that you can get involved if you're interested. We're always looking for volunteers from many different standpoints, from our fundraising, like the Walk to End Alzheimer's and the Longest Day. We're looking for not only just donors, but people to help with that. You can help from our advocacy side. We do a lot in Des Moines, obviously the capital of Iowa, to help further some of our mission there with the legislators. And you can also volunteer and do something like Janelle has done, where she's a community educator. We do offer many local support groups as well. You can volunteer in that capacity, or you can attend a support group and come to. We have gone mostly online, virtual lately. So if you're interested in joining a support group, I will share my information here before we go. And then finally, we have the Trial Match program, which is a clinical trial program, and you do not have to have Alzheimer's or dementia in order to enroll in a clinical trial. They also look for folks that are healthy, and they look for caregivers. They look for people living with dementia. And so what Trial Match is the Alzheimer's Association matches you with a clinical trial that is at least hopefully somewhat local to you. And if you visit our website at alz.org, you can find more information on that as well. So that being said, I'm going to exit this screen and I'm going to pull up a Word document and put my contact information on it for you. I should have done this before we started, but here's my name, Kara Fishburne. I'm going to make it a little bit larger for you. We'll be able to do it. There we go. Kara Fishburne, and my email address is kmfishburne@alz.org. And my office line is 319-238-7641. So I'll leave that up there for a second. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate you hopping on and listening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me here locally or to that 800 helpline that we gave before. Have a wonderful day, and I hope you all stay safe and healthy.